Who watches The Watchmen? We do! Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Tara, and we are going to talk about Watchmen Season 1, Episode 8. It is called A God Walks In to Abar. Now, you're probably saying... Sorry?
Clever.
Well, hold on. Did you know this was clever?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you... Because I didn't actually get this. I had to Google Abar. And what do you associate Abar with?
Angela Abar?
Ah, no. You're going to like this then, because it's got another meaning on top of that.
Mm.
I never even thought of that. That's actually quite good. But on top of that, I googled Abar just to see what would come up. Right, thinking, oh, maybe it's like a biblical reference or something. You know, Abar sounds like it could be like a Bible name or something. Out of that fictional book. But anyway, so I googled it, and one of the first things that came up on Wikipedia was a blaxploitation film from 1977 called, I shit you not, Abar, the First Black Superman.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That can't be a coincidence.
No, there's no way that's a coincidence.
I wonder if they came up with if Lindelof came up with the name Abar for Angela and Cal to have.
Probably.
Because of that.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. He probably named them that for that reason. But I never thought about it, and then because let's be honest, I didn't remember her last name. That's why I didn't think of that. but I googled Abar, and that's what came up, and I thought that was pretty neat. So, and given that, I mean, not only is Angela named Abar, the fact that Manhattan kind of doesn't walk into his body, but kind of becomes an Abar, like he walks into Abar, but he's also walking into a bar, literally on the all of it's wonderful. It's all making sense. It's all beautiful stuff. This episode is fantastic and probably the best episode of the show. Do you agree?
Might be the best episode of television I've ever seen.
I can't go that far, but
my god, it's beautiful.
Top 20.
It's so beautiful.
Top 20 episodes of all time, maybe. I can maybe give you that. But I've watched a lot of good TV. So, what am I looking for? I want my pen. I want to click my pen. My pen's not there. I'm annoyed. That's my pen. My pen.
Do you remember reading The Watchmen for the first time?
For the first time? Sure. It was probably about 2007, 2008, something in that range.
Yeah, I think it was around there for me too. And like everyone telling you that the comic book is special, and then you get to the Dr. Manhattan issue where he is trying to, or where Alan Moore is sort of in a way writing like the mind of God and how maybe they would foresee time. And you read that one and you go, oh, this isn't just special, it's like extraordinary.
Yes.
And I gotta say, like, Lindelof nails it.
Yeah, this episode...
I had that feeling watching this.
This episode is very much this show's version of that issue of the comic, and we'll get into it. It's really well done in a number of ways. I'm going to try something. We'll see if this works. Tara has a great deal of respect for me and thinks that I am very intelligent, and has a great revere for me. I know this because she's going to tell me this in 20 minutes' time. We'll see if this pans out. We'll see if this pans out.
Lindelof did not write our review, so don't hold your breath.
Just for the joke, in 20 minutes' time, you could humor me and tell me that, okay? Just for the joke, woman. All right.
Just can't lie to the people.
This is an outrage. Damn it. I actually took notes for this episode, and I wasn't intending to. I watched the episode yesterday, and obviously it was a very complicated episode because it was jumping back and forth because it's doing all this Dr. Manhattan perspective of things shifting and changing. But, we were going to record tonight, and you said, I'll be ready in about an hour. And you even said, I'm going to watch the episode again because I want to rewatch it. And I said, you know what? I've got nothing else to do for the next hour. I'm going to watch it again. So I took notes as I was watching it for the second time. And it starts, and I think we said last week, they have to tell us a story. We have to get flashbacks to how Manhattan and Angela became a couple and how it happened. And they spent the whole episode basically doing that in the most best way they possibly could, by doing it from Manhattan's perspective, where time is going back and forth. We get different time periods overlapping each other. We get his perspective on things, which leads to a lot of great little jokes, great little moments. There's actually a moment towards the end of this episode that I thought was very touching. All right, so we start. I got confused when I looked at my notes right before we started, because I looked at the first thing I'd written, and it was Manhattan dash bar, and I went, that was Vietnam, not Manhattan. Why did I write Manhattan? Oh.
We're off to a good start.
Dr. Manhattan. I should have written Dr. Manhattan. That would have made it clear. It's just me not understanding my own notes. So Dr. Manhattan lands in the street, and I remembered one of these shots from the very first trailer, because it was like a tease at the end of the trailer where he's bending down to pick something up, and we see here it's actually a Manhattan mask. He puts on one of the plastic Manhattan masks so that no one sees that it's really him. And obviously the first thing we have to mention is the cinematography hides his face. We never actually get to see what he looks like, his face, until he changes it. So we never actually know what he looked like originally. We never get to see what raw Dr. Manhattan looked like.
I think it's okay.
I think it's great. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I'm fine with the decision. I was curious too, like, when they're going to show me, and of course they don't, but it's all right. I mean, we get the idea.
I think it's genius. I think leaving it to mystery kind of, it's like he's kind of whatever you imagine. It's this idea that he's so mythical in our minds that anything they could show us would be almost too definitive. So it's like, no, just in our heads we'll have that glowy blue face, whatever version, and then from then on afterwards when he changes, it's Cal in some capacity. So I thought that was really neat. But I liked all the shots where they were hiding it, where there was like an empty glass in front of his face and the foreground sort of making it all blurry, or there'd be all these little things. So he sits down, Angela's there. We don't necessarily know right away what this is, but we find out later this is 2009, which amusingly is when the movie came out. Just coincidental because it was 10 years ago, but and she's in Vietnam, she's a cop, and he sits down and he offers her a beer, and she's like, no, get lost, I'm leaving. He's like, hey, if I can guess why you're commiserating and why you're drinking here alone tonight, will you have the beer with me? And she's like, sure. You're commiserating the memory of your parents' death. It's the anniversary. And she's like, okay, I suppose fair play. You got it right. Sit down.
Yeah, she immediately suspects that somebody set him over there to talk to her. Somebody from the precinct or whatever she says. Yeah,
because she asks, how do you know that? And he's like, well, I'm Dr. Manhattan. And
Panda tell you. Just kidding. Panda's not here yet.
And Regina King, throughout this entire this conversation, because we come back to this bar conversation throughout the episode, like her reactions and playing along and being like, this guy's full of bullshit, and she's kind of like just sort of sarcastically going along with it the.
But eventually, her tone gets a little more flirty. It's working.
Sure, yeah. But she says, how do you know this is the anniversary of my parents' death? And he's like, because you tell me in 20 minutes time. And I'm like, okay. And it was at that moment when he said that, okay, first of all, that's going to happen later in the episode. We're actually going to get to that moment. But secondly, I immediately realized what they were going to do with this episode. Maybe not exactly, but like I realized, okay, we're doing the Manhattan perspective. We're going to be jumping around all over the place. And so some really great stuff comes from that. He explains some things that we kind of guessed to a point, but he says, I've not been on Mars. That's just basically a holographic video loop to pretend that I'm on Mars. I've been on Europa, which did you correctly guessed the moon, right? You said Europa.
Yeah.
Take a point.
I did.
Take a point. You're on your
amateur
point.
astronomer at the works. Yeah, I mean, you can sort of see a moon in the background of it that looked like Io, which is like a more orangey moon, and it's because it's volcanic. And I thought it's probably Io, which means it's the next closest one, which is Europa. I think the other two would be too cold, too desolate. They are Ganymede and Callisto. Not in that order, though.
You were supposed to tell me that I was really impressive and smart in 20 minutes, not the other way around. Now I need to tell you you're really impressive and smart.
Yeah, there are some things I learned in school that I kept. Usually stuff about space.
I wish I'd learned more about space in school. I should have picked physics. I never picked physics. I did chemistry instead. I've made mistakes, damn it. Anyway, so he tells that, and then he talks about creating life. And we see this kind of montage of him making the bubble and like rising the very first Phillips and Miss Crookshank, out of the water. And they're all naked, and we only ever see him from behind, and he's walking on the water because she makes a little dig. Oh, hey, you walk on water? It's like, sometimes. Like, no biggie. I know what, Manhattan likes to pretend he doesn't have an ego. He's got an ego. He's very carefully dropping all these little. By the way, I'm basically a god, like in the conversation just as much as I can. But so we see this all created. We see the manor that he makes for them, which we've seen. Ozymandias in. We've seen this. We've seen Vite in this place. So it confirms he made this, and then of course she. When they come back, she kind of brings up, or he tells her how he knows about the parents. 20 minutes later, blah blah blah, and this is when it goes into the first sort of extended kind of like time period.
Mm-hmm.
When she asks about the English manor, and he explains where that comes from. He didn't just make one from scratch. He transported one from somewhere in England, which is where he and his father went to, for shelter essentially during Nazi Germany time. Yeah, because his father was Jewish and they fled. I didn't remember I'm sure this is in the comic, but the detail about how his mother, fell in love with an SS officer. That's a pretty dark backstory.
I don't remember that either.
Yeah, but we see it.
I think we only really learned that he's a immigrant and his dad made watches.
Yeah, and we see that here as well. His dad is making watches because it's something that he can fix, which is kind of a sad sentiment, Like he focuses on that because he can fix those things. He can't fix his own life, but he can fix the watches.
That's what great writing does, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very good. And we find out, we kind of see this coming, I think, to a point where, but eventually, Kid John is running through, and he's kind of sneaking around. He steals an apple. He's doing all these things, and he ends up in a big closet, or a big bedroom, and he's sneaking about. But people are coming in, so he hides in the closet, and it's the Mr. and Mrs. of this manor, and lo and behold, it's the human beings that Miss Crookshanks and Phillips are based on. And they're having sex. Well, they're starting to have sex until he makes a noise, and obviously they get startled, and all stops. And they come to speak to him afterwards, and they're nice to him. And they try to explain to him, hey, what we were doing wasn't wrong. Like you saw something kind of natural, and they try to kind of explain it to him that they were creating life. A
beautiful thing, yeah.
A beautiful thing. And they hand him a Bible, which they're clearly going to hand out to everyone because they've got like a big stack of them all wrapped up, ready to go. And he's like, oh, well, I have one. My father doesn't believe in any of this. And I thought it was kind of an interesting response where, and I'm going to call her Crookshanks, because that's probably not a real name, but but Crookshanks says, oh, that's okay. I mean, even if you don't believe, there's still a lot of exciting stories in there. Never read it. I'm not going to confirm or deny that.
I have, yeah.
Are they exciting? Is there fun to be had?
I like the stories.
Okay.
I mean, I've only read the Old Testament, not the New Testament.
That's the violent stuff, the good
I like
stuff.
The stories. I think the stories are great. And I like the expanded material. Like, I love John Milton, and I love Paradise Lost, which just expands on the story of Genesis.
The Bible has an expanded universe? What, the Bible Star Wars all of a sudden? What was happening?
Yeah, but they're legends, not canon. Although Milton often gets confused with the real canonical Bible, because his stories are so good.
I just heard you refer to something that's not canon to the Bible. That's just really funny to me.
No, that's where the word canon comes from. If it's canonical, it means it's biblical. Because there are other stories that are written around the same time, but they're not considered canon. They're called pseudepigrapha or something.
Right. This might not mean that much to you, but this will mean a lot to some of our audience. So you're telling me the Old Testament to New Testament, it was basically the Bible's version of a crisis?
What?
In DC Comics, right, when they want to reset reality and change things up, they have what's called a crisis. The first big one was Crisis on Infinite Earths, and it merged all the Earths into one Earth, so it rewrote the history of everyone. So there was this new Earth after the crisis. So
right, back to the episode.
Yeah, back to the episode, yes. I think thematically there's maybe some stuff in there. I mean, because we do talk about Manhattan being a god and he's creating things here, so there's some relevance in there, but
he's literally creating Genesis on Europa.
Yes,
creating the Garden of Eden.
I joke here about I made a dig earlier about calling it fictional, the Bible, but Manhattan actually says that in this episode at one point. He refers to it as fabricated or whatever, which it makes sense that Manhattan would not be religious. I mean, he's a god figure. Like he could literally see the universe for what it is. He's not got any delusions of, higher beings. He is one. He's like, there's nothing above me in the food chain. It's me.
Yeah.
Me.
But he does look. He's kind of spiritual though, in a way. I mean, he does still like use science as a like a spirituality.
Sure.
He does, like the way he refers to Laurie's birth and how like I can't remember the way he explains it in the Watchmen book, but and how like he calls her a miracle, right?
Yeah, that's
Because of all the possible combinations of people that could exist, it's her, even though it was the most unlikely of circumstances, because she was the offspring of a woman who and a man that hated each other and should never have
sure. Yeah,
gotten together.
He respects the of chance, I suppose, if you will. But
I think he refers to it in something other than a miracle, but yeah, I can't remember.
But this is the weird thing about Manhattan, is that he kind of negates the idea of chance, because from his perspective, everything is going to happen no matter what. So there's a question comes up of, is there any free will? Is there anything we can actually do? We just straight up no, there is no free will. I
don't think he believes in free will.
We went on such a ramble there that I'm actually not entirely sure we left off on my notes. It was creating the manor and the reasons for that, and all the stuff from his childhood. That's what we're talking about. And then he ends that with saying, so I created them not in my image, I created Adam and Eve in their image, because they're the kind of the memory he has of creating life. Like, that's kind of the first fundamental thing he thinks about, is the speech they gave him all those years ago. 70 years ago, as he points out. So Manhattan's pretty old. I mean, he's not aging in the same way that other people do, if at all.
No. Did you know Regina King's 48?
I didn't know she was that exact. I knew she was in her 40s. I didn't know she was pushing 50.
Good for her.
Yeah.
She looks awesome.
I'm cutting it close in this 20-minute you telling me I'm amazing deadline. No, I'm not going to throw me a bone. Okay. So we come back to the bar, and Angela, accuses him, says that, oh, you've got a great imagination, I'll tell you that. And he kind of chuckles. It says, 6 months from now, a friend is telling me I have no imagination, which again is something that comes back up later. And eventually it goes to him saying that, like, he's in love with her. And she's like, whoa, we met 10 minutes ago. When did you fall in love with me? He's like, I was already in love with you. And he sort of reminds her that he experiences time differently. Like, his perception of time is kind of all at once. And she even says, well, at what moment did you fall in love with me then? And he's like, there is no moment. I just was already in love with you. Like, I already knew I had to come here. I'm in love with you. That's such a great payoff later on. Such a great payoff. And he reiterates that he wants dinner tomorrow, and he sees them having dinner tomorrow. And she's like, nope, wrong. And then she insists that she actually hates Dr. Manhattan because of everything that happened with Dr. Manhattan in Vietnam led to her parents' death. And he actually kind of, like, I don't know if apologize is the right word, but he says, if it makes you feel better, I do regret it. I regret my actions.
Yeah, he says he regrets it.
Yeah.
And then we get our first peek of, well, if you regret it, then if you knew you were going to regret it, then why would you do it? She's just trying to prove that he's not Dr. Manhattan. But then he has his Dr. Manhattan answer. Yeah,
he's like, what, you've never done anything that you knew you were going to regret? And she's like, well, I suppose. Yeah, okay, you make a point. Make a point. And it's obviously during this story that she, he's like, oh, so it's the anniversary of your parents' death. She's like, well, yeah, but you knew that. Well, no, you just told me. This was the moment. 20 minutes later in the conversation. And I think that's just like a nice little simple example of this at the start, to sort of like put your mind in the right frame of mind for the rest of the episode, because like it's like, okay, I understand how this is working now. Things are going to call back and forth. And I love what they do with this towards the end. And then she's like, well, if we go on a date though, like, you're a big glowy blue man. And I know you're repressing the glowing right now and whatnot, but like eventually we're going to have to be in public.
Well, yeah.
And he's like,
today, the day that he's seen her is the day of like the big VV festival thing.
yeah.
So, like, everybody looks like Dr. Manhattan in the bar.
Well, yeah, they all
Although
look,
notably, some of them don't have his body.
yeah, cheap knockoffs. There's some very fat men painted blue, sort of walking around. Yeah, and he's like, yeah, but you're going to have a solution to this, and that's when we get our next section that's in a different time period, but this time it's 6 months ahead of this meeting. Oh, sorry, no, 2 weeks ahead. Sorry, not 6 months yet. 2 weeks ahead. Where she's in a morgue with them and they're picking out bodies. She's like, this is this dude, and she opens like 3 drawers in the morgue, and notably none of them look like Cal, and they have a bit of a debate about, and he's like, I don't really care what I look like as long as you're comfortable with it, that's all that matters. And she's like, I don't care either. Well, why have you not picked one of these 3 then? Is there another option? And then she opens a 4th drawer and it is Cal, as we recognize him. And this is when Manhattan turns into Cal, and now we get to see his face. Now it doesn't hide his face anymore because it's Cal.
I have an odd question.
Sure.
Do you think she murdered the real Cal? She's like, nobody knows how he died. Heart attack, maybe? Who knows?
You think she went out?
Because there are these 3 options, but let's just say that they are lesser.
Yes.
And sure, like, she's super woke. She's like, sure, I don't care. Like, any of these would be fine. But, like, she just had this hidden, beautiful black man in the morgue. And so when he says, who would you be comfortable with? I mean, she went with Cal, the beautiful black man.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like, there seems to be an implication there that this is like something she wanted to have in the morgue.
Look, I don't think that she went out and murdered herself a husband. Okay, like, I don't think that's what she did. But I do think there's some analysing to be done here about her hiding this option.
Yeah.
And then pulling him out sort of after being prodded. Like, it's almost like she didn't.
She was embarrassed to admit that she would be more comfortable with.
Yeah, maybe.
Someone who
Yeah,
looked like her.
Like she didn't want to appear like she had to have a black man. But then it was like, no, this is actually the one I want. This is, and obviously there's nothing wrong with that. That's a preference. That's a preference. But
no, I mean, eventually we see him naked and we see why she chose him.
Are we really going there already? Do we have to go to that? I mean,
I would just be more comfortable with Cal.
I was going to happily go through this entire episode and never once mention how extremely huge his penis is, but you had to bring it up. So she picks Cal, and it's actually kind of a beautiful moment. The piano music kind of comes in, and it's kind of sensual, and he's Manhattan symbol still on his forehead, and she's like, "You missed this," and he kind of like goes doop, and it kind of fades away. It's sweet. It's a sweet moment.
I love the music in this episode.
Oh, it's
I love all
fantastic,
the opening stuff too, with like the waltz while he was making the Garden of Eden. Like, I really noticed the song selections of this episode a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and some of it was source music, obviously, but I think I have to really commend. Like, there's a lot of music in this that sounds very Trent Reznor, but there's definitely music in this episode, especially, that does not sound Trent Reznor. He's clearly more versatile than perhaps maybe people give him credit for. I don't know. All right, so we have some details that come up here where they're back in the bar, and she says, okay, so we get together. All right, fine. How long are we together? And he's like, 10 years, give or take. And it's going to have a tragic ending. It's like, you're going to elaborate on that, or tell me about this tragic ending. And then a song starts playing, because she's like, prove it. She's like, well, in 30 seconds time, your favorite song is going to start playing. And I love the performance from Regina King here, where she goes, holy shit. And she's like, she looks genuinely shocked and goes, I've never heard this before.
It's a pretty smooth move, actually, to be like, this is your favorite song. Well, in the future, because this is the song where you met me.
And that's basically, I mean, he doesn't say it and spell it out like that, but he says, well, it is now. It's going to be your favourite song. And the song, for the record, is Tunnel of Love, which is relevant later.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the main lyrics. And then we get a very extended time period kind of portion as he's telling some of the story, because he explains that he's going to have to, like, in 6 months' time, she's going to tell him to leave. And then she keeps prodding. He's like, well, we're having sex. He's like, well, it doesn't sound like I'm telling you to leave. He's like, no, you do. And then we cut to this time where she's asking him, while having sex, where are you right now? And this is something that actually harkens back to the comic book. This is a moment that was in the comic book a lot with Laurie, where she got really mad at him for kind of being other places and other times whilst they were being intimate. And he says, oh, I'm in the bar talking to you right before I make an egg. And I started laughing. I'm like, okay, eggs have been a thing this season. We've been talking about eggs a lot.
Yeah.
More eggs are coming up. Very good. Right. Little tease for later. And one of the things I like is she gets kind of like, she's taken out at the moment, so she stops, having sex, and she's sort of like, okay, we're not going to fight, right? You keep telling me that we're about to fight in this, this part of time. We're not going to do it because I'm making the choice not to fight. And of course, they're going to fight. Like, this is going to prove them right. I
mean, they're sort of already fighting.
Yes.
She has to make the choice, the effort not to be mad at him. She's mad at him. It's the I'm fine conversation.
Yes. And for the record, I did get that too. Thank you very much. I'm not oblivious. But she's trying very hard not to fight. And ultimately, his insistence that they're going to fight leads to them fighting. It leads to them being upset. And she's like, well, I'm risking stuff every day being with you, right? What are you risking? I mean, when was the last time you felt fear? And he describes the creation of Dr. Manhattan. He describes going into the vault and the watch being there and realizing that the machine's about to turn on and that he's about to have his atoms ripped apart, yada, yada, yada. And she's like, well, what to do? You came back together again? No, that was 50 years ago. And he says, I'm being torn apart right now. I love that line. I am being torn apart. Like, he feels it all the time because he's always experiencing it at the same time.
Yeah. Do you think he's always experiencing, like, the other parts, like the pleasurable moments all the time? They just kind of, like, cancel each other out. That's why he's always neutral.
Are you asking me if he's constantly orgasming, technically?
He's like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm coming at home. I'm coming at work. I'm always coming. Have you not seen that? Pumping Iron.
I've seen the clip. I've seen the clip.
That's my favorite Arnold movie. If he's always feeling the pain, then he's always feeling the pleasure in life too.
I thought you were going to ask a more interesting question, like, is he always also having sex with Laurie? Well, he's having sex with Angela.
Ooh. Yeah, imagine if she said, where are you right now? He's like, oh, I'm inside my ex-lover.
Was that not good enough to get a "You're amazing, Peter"?
Oh, they would fight.
Oh, they would fight. Yeah, if he said that, they would fight. Like Manhattan. What was that?
She would say, "Leave instantly."
Yes, instantly. We wouldn't even have to have a fight first. It would just be instantly leave. It'd be "Get out!" to quote Arnold again.
Get out.
Yeah. Get out of me. Sorry. So she eventually is like, okay, do you need me to say it? And he's like, yes, you have to kind of fulfill the moment, essentially. And she's like, leave. So he does. He just boops out of there.
But I love his reaction. His reaction of, like, genuine, like, surprise.
There's a lot of good performances in this episode, but mainly from the two of these actors, obviously. And I think what's great about the actor playing Cal is that obviously they hired him knowing what he was going to be doing for the whole show, right? So they knew they had to get a great actor. But what's interesting from our perspective is that for 6-7 episodes, he was not much more than just this minor side character who didn't really get to show that he was a good actor. I mean, he was fine. It wasn't like he was sticking out as a sore thumb or anything like that. But we never got to see him be a good actor because he just had these small scenes here or there that, you know.
Sure. But we know he's capable. He was the guy in Striking Vipers.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we know, but I mean, in terms of the show, the context of the show, like, for 6-7 episodes, they were hiding the fact that this guy is such a good actor because, like, we don't want you to know, like, how important he is, like, later kind of thing, you know?
Sure. Well, I mean, if it was Anthony Hopkins playing the role, you would be like, okay, you have Anthony Hopkins. Like, I know
Well,
you're going to use him.
well, this would be a weird dynamic if Regina King was married to 85-year-old Anthony
Hey, she
Hopkins.
said she doesn't care what he looks like.
She cares if he's 85.
And she's like almost 50.
Not 10 years ago she wasn't. 38 Regina King shacking up with 75-year-old Anthony Hopkins doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Look, all I'm saying is that if we know the actor's good, we're just waiting for his big moment. But you're right. He is a relatively, I guess, unknown, unless you're a fan of Black Mirror.
Yes.
'Cause he was great in that.
He was good in that.
It was such a complicated relationship, much like this.
Okay, so we cut to the Arctic. This is a long review, damn it. We cut to the Arctic.
It was always good to be a long review.
And he's walking through the snow, butt-ass naked. Which, because for the reference, he does leave the scene with Angela naked. He was, because we're in bed having sex. So he's in the Arctic, and he's walking through the snow naked.
He's going to see his old colleague. Like, he's used to seeing him naked.
Sure. He will see Veidt, who's at this time in the Arctic. He's in his secret base, and it was great seeing this set. Actually, the fact that they went to the effort of like having all this was great.
I love the retro future look.
Yeah, and he's sitting there, kind of like complaining that humans are still messing with nuclear power plants and building bombs and whatnot. And he's like, you, John, welcome back. And he's like,
I guess 2009, that would be Fukushima, right? Oh, no.
No, that was 2011, isn't it?
That was 2010.
Okay, in between.
Because he's talking about a meltdown happening.
Yes.
I don't know. I was trying to relate it to current events, but
Sure.
Fukushima was a year later.
Doesn't need to. It was a different timeline at this point.
It is.
Yeah, so it doesn't really matter that much.
Maybe it's Chernobyl, but like later. Maybe it happened later in the Watchmen universe.
Or it's Chernobyl 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Ooh.
Hey, that means this world gets a second Chernobyl miniseries. I'm a little bit jealous almost.
I hope it's the guy who makes American Horror Story or American Hero Story.
Oh yeah, I was like, horror story. Ryan Murphy. Why do you want Ryan Murphy making it? So, and yes, this is the scene in question where we see the schlong. So, to move swiftly on, we have Veidt being asked a favor of Manhattan, and there's a little bit of he's aware that he's also experiencing the past. They reference Veidt trying to destroy him 30 years ago or 20 years ago, whatever it was at this point. 20 something, yeah.
30. Or, yeah, 20 something, yeah.
24. Actually, I wrote it down.
24.
It's in my notes. 24 years ago.
Yeah, it was 1985.
And he kind of said, oh, sorry about that. He kind of nonchalantly apologized for trying to destroy him. What I thought was really notable here is, so he kind of like prods at him, and he's like, oh, this is interesting that you look human. Like, why would you look human? It makes a dig about the appropriation of being a black man. Which I don't know, if it kind of feels a little hollow coming from Veidt for whatever reason, but it feels like he's just trying to provoke him rather than he actually cares about what he's saying. But he's kind of like, okay, why would you look like this? Oh, it's a woman, isn't it? You're in love. He's like, yes, and you look.
One weakness.
And you look like this. Because, I mean, there's something to say there, right? That this being of Manhattan who looks at the world the way he does still feels love and still is, still needs that in his life in some way.
Well, I mean, like you said, he always feels the pain from being from that one night or that he was, killed. He still feels all that. He's still that child. He's still experiencing like his humanity, even as a god.
Yeah, and he incorrectly guesses that Angela doesn't know who she is, obviously, but he incorrectly guesses that Angela doesn't know that he's Manhattan. He's like, no, I told her the night we met. Like, she does know. He's like, but you're not really human, and you want to be human so that you can be with her. And this is where it turns out that device that she pulled out of his head, that we, again, also I'm doing the Cyclops thing, I'm not. I'm doing the circle on Manhattan's head. Yes, there you go. That's a good way of doing it. I'll just draw it. Yeah. All right. So it comes from Veidt, who it turns out built this thing 30 years ago. This was this was actually Plan A for amnesia, as he puts it. where this would take away his memory so that he wouldn't know that he's Manhattan. And he ended up going with Plan B for whatever reason. It sounds like that only now, because he's taken human form, he has a brain that can be manipulated. Whereas before maybe he didn't have that, because he makes a point of asking that since he looks human, do you now have the brain and the blood and the vessels and all the rest of it? Do you still have all the physiology of it? And he's like, yeah, I do. Why? And he's like, okay, so we put this in, and he says something here which didn't actually come up in the way I thought it was going to come up, but it did come up later in the episode when Veidt says, oh, you wouldn't remember that you're Manhattan, except maybe in times in near-death situations where instinct would maybe kick in. That's actually used to explain something that's already happened. I thought it was going to be something that we see at some point later in the episode, but
we might still.
Yeah, we may still. Yeah.
I don't know. There seems to be an implication here that maybe, like, he says he can transfer his powers like through something consumable, and who knows? Maybe maybe Angela has some powers that he gave her. Because he said he would never do it without consent. But if she consents in the future, then he has her consent.
Oh yeah, we haven't actually gotten to that conversation yet, but yeah.
Right.
That's possible. But yeah, so basically, and this is where obviously Veidt says he has no imagination, and he kind of chuckles, because this is when he kind of thinks it's funny.
Yeah. I like Veidt's reaction too, like, you laugh? She must be something.
But he says that before he puts it out, if there's anything you want to do with your memory, go and do it now. And he says, oh, I have to go speak to Angela's grandfather. And obviously, I think our ears all perk up. We're like, oh, this is interesting. Let's go speak to Will. 10 years prior. And then it gets to the point where Veidt wants something in return. And we've been speculating, probably because of the game warden, as we've been, the sort of the captive nature of Veidt's sort of imprisonment, as it were. Even the imprisonment itself, using that word. We've assumed that he was imprisoned, that Manhattan put him there to keep him there. But this scene says that no, Veidt actually wanted to, because he says, am I going to live to see the utopia that I'm trying to create? Is this world going to become what I want it to be? And he says, no, but there is one elsewhere. I built one on Europa. I almost said on Utopia there. So they're actually very similar words, Europa, Utopia. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so he's like, hey,
maybe not coincidence.
Yeah, can I send? Do you want me to send you there? And he's like, yes, please. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see, this utopia. Because and this is what I thought was interesting, is that Manhattan says that, like the people he created to just care for others rather than themselves, that their love was never ending. It was infinite, and that's why it was boring. That's why it was unfulfilling. And that's why he came to Earth to find Angela, because that love with a time limit is actually more meaningful. The idea that a person can waver or it will end in tragedy someday.
Which you have to earn it.
Yeah, and you have to earn it.
It's not just something that people give.
It's in the love that we actually create and have with each other that actually means something. And even to Manhattan, someone who's supposedly a god, and I get why people call him a god, I get why people say he's a godlike figure. I do prefer that over just calling him a god. Because there's clearly still humanity, despite everything.
Well, he has limitations where I imagine whatever God is, doesn't.
Or isn't, as the case may be.
Yeah. I'm also an atheist.
Yeah.
But the idea of God.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
But no, I thought that was so fascinating. There's a couple of lines. The other one, of course, him saying that he's exploding right now. But this one here, where he says that the love was unfulfilling, or however he phrases it, really kind of spoke to me as a character beat. And this idea that's actually kind of what we've been seeing from Veidt and all these flashes to his time in this Europa, bubble, is that's why he's ultimately wanting to leave, is because it's unfulfilling. It's like, and we get obviously more at the end, and there's a post-credit scene. If anyone didn't know, there's a post-credit scene in this episode that you may want to go check out if you turned it off when the credits hit, which is entirely possible. So Infinite Love's unsatisfying. And then it cuts to him giving the device to Angela, and she's like, I just push it in your head, that kind of thing. And she suggests moving to Tulsa, because that's where her family's from. And he's like, oh, that's a great idea. And he smiles at her, and she's like, but it was your idea. He's like, no, it was yours. So again, this is kind of the looping back again, because we're going to later see that he actually says that she's going to have this idea, so therefore she's always going to have the idea. There's this looping. I like to call this paradox, not the chicken and the egg. I like to call this the Johnny B. Good paradox. If you've seen Back to the Future, you'll know why.
I really love the fight stuff before we get off from there. I like this this continuation of his character, because I was kind of wondering about this, where the end of the Watchmen, he does it in order to create a future that will be better for humanity. But he does live in this future, and humanity is not better off. He hasn't really done very much. Like, yeah, he saved nuclear war, but we didn't go into a utopia that he was. Yeah. His ultimate plan was.
Notably, we forgot to mention, he's we see him actually like sending the little squid. Like he's got this machine.
Yeah, he's still keeping the squids going. He's the one who's doing it. Although I don't know who's doing it while he's on Europa.
It's not a timer.
Maybe Manhattan's got a clone there or something. Who knows?
It's not a timer.
Or timer, yeah. Sure. Or just Manhattan wills it. Who knows? But it was a really satisfying, like, I don't want to say conclusion, because his story's still going, but like I was curious about that. And this episode addresses it and tells us why he chose to go to Europa, because he still wants to be praised. He still wants to be the new Alexander the Great. He wants to have acolytes and be known for the great things that he does.
Yeah, he even says,
there's this really great picture of him behind him while he's talking about it. This picture of him as Ozymandias in his outfit, and there's all these angels, but they're the angels that are like babies that are all on the ground and like worshiping him from below. And it's such a cool little like foreshadowing of his life to come.
And he even says as much actually because he says that he saved the world from destruction and no one knows. He wants the recognition. He wants to be revered for it.
He knows. I mean, but he knows when he did it that he couldn't have that, but he can't help but want it. Like,
oh, of course, yeah. He
his
obviously
life feels so and he doesn't have the utopia that he wanted also. So what is he getting out of it?
He obviously made the choice that he was okay with that when he did it, but time going past has made him more and more bitter about the fact that no one knows and no one cares that it was him.
He wants to be a god.
He's got more of a god complex than Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's the thing though. Like if Manhattan's Watchmen's version of Superman, Ozymandias is very much the Lex Luthor. Obviously they're not quite as opposed to each other as those characters are, but there's definitely a lot of parallels.
I mean, he is the man who outsmarted him.
Yeah, and he wants to constantly think he's better. He's very cynical towards them. There's parallels to be had there. And then we come back to the bar before we finish the push into the head scene. I want to mention one moment from the cinematography. I love, there's a moment where Angela asks him, if you lose your memory, will you still be you? And I loved it when he's answering this, it cuts to a shot of their shadows on the wall. It's really pretty. So it's really nice. And this is when you can create life, and so do it. And he makes an egg, and she's like, a chicken would be more impressive. Here's a question, actually. If Manhattan just makes an egg in his hand, as a vegan, are you okay having a go at that egg?
Okay, there's a common misconception about veganism.
Oh God!
It's not that
what have I done? What have I done? I've made a mistake.
I'm just clarifying, because a lot of people ask me this kind of stuff, like is breast milk vegan if it comes from an animal? And the answer is not whether or not it comes from an animal. It's whether or not there's any cruelty involved.
Wait, that's why I'm asking the question. Are you okay eating this egg?
So if a chicken egg is produced and there was no cruelty involved in it, then yes.
I mean, I
Much
wouldn't,
like lab-grown meat, it would be vegan.
So anyway, it's from this egg that we get to the conversation about having kids. She says, how many kids do we have? He says 3. And she's very insistent. She doesn't want kids. She never has wanted kids. And he says they're adopted. He's like, well, how long until we adopt these kids in Tulsa? And he says, I don't know. There's a blank spot. Well, before we get to that, actually, he also mentions that he would never pass on his abilities without consent, which you brought up earlier. And she's like, you can do that? And he's like, well, yeah, theoretically. And he actually describes it in a really weird way. He basically says that he could make a Manhattan burger, and if the person ate the Manhattan burger, they'd get his powers, which is a really weird way to phrase it. I mean, he doesn't say, man. I mean,
a little bit. But I think it's implying that it's some kind of consumable.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, he doesn't say burger. I'm joking, burger, but like he basically says he'll make an edible like mass.
Yeah.
And the person could consume it.
And notably, he tries to make waffles later.
He does try to make waffles. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he
destroys the eggs.
Yeah, but I assumed the thing he would make would just be out of nowhere, not like using actual like get me the flour and the eggs.
Maybe he's already made it. Who knows? That's what I'm saying. I mean, if Angela gives him consent in the future to do it in the past, he can do it.
That's true. Yes, that's logic. Yes. So, but yeah, this is the interesting part, is that, and this makes sense. This makes complete sense to me. I was already kind of expecting this, but it was nice to get this little confirmation here that he's like, I don't know when we get the kids because there's a 10-year gap. There's a 10-year blank spot where I can't see anything. And it's because for the duration of time that he has that device in his head, not knowing that he's Manhattan, he is not experiencing any of that. It's not in his, like, blanket of experiences, at least not from this side of it. I guess there's an implication after the fact that he maybe can remember it in the past tense now. Because he recalls the Christmas incident. He kind of like remembers some of that.
Yeah, I think, well, but also that is the day that he had a slight flip, right? Like he sort of came back for a sec.
Yeah, maybe he only remembers that because he did kind of come out of the trance, if you want to call it that, for like a minute, and that's why he can recall that.
Reactionary thing for survival. Yeah.
Yeah, to save Angela. He sort of became Manhattan again for a second, so it. So, and it's interesting that this episode does answer a lot of little things. It answers that moment, it answers the squids, it answers a bunch of little things that have been peppered throughout the show. But, and then she's like, oh, that sounds like Angela's like, oh, that sounds like a tunnel of love. And she's like really sarcastic when she says it as well. But she's got such a smirk in her face. So that's really cool. And it goes back to the 6 months later when he's got the ring and she's putting it in his forehead. And it kind of swoops in. And again, music's really beautiful here. Really, really good. But the other thing I noticed here is that this tragedy that's going to happen, we know we're building up to it in present day. And I also love this idea because he says to her right before she puts it in that, like, because she says, I'll just leave it in forever then. And he's like, I'll leave it in your hands. But he knows that there's a portion of, like, he knows that after this gap, he's back again. So she's always going to take it out. It's always going to come out and he's going to become Manhattan again. And
he's already told her that it's 10 years.
Yeah.
That the tunnel is
which
10 years.
I think it's a very interesting thing to recontextualize the show. Like, if we go back and watch it now, does her agitation, like, read a little bit better now as fear because she knows time is running out? Like, she knows at that time where she's going to lose her husband as he is. And he might die. He's told her
that it ends tragically.
Yeah.
And they're only together for 10 years.
Which, notably though, tragedy does leave room open for interpretation. Because it doesn't necessarily mean death. It could mean a number of things.
Yes.
So it's left it open for what we're doing. And it's notable though that after she puts it in, that is when we come to present day. We come to her holding it in present day. And she's like, shit, we're screwed now. And we see the blue light and he's floating in the air. And he still looks like Cal. He's blue, but he's like, and it's notable that she actually, and I like this. She points out that she makes a point of saying, "Hey, you still look like Cal," because that clearly tells us that he did not look like Cal before. Like before he took his body, this is a change that he still kind of looks like him in some way, even though he's blue. So yeah, so he's floating. He's confused. He's remembering the Christmas thing. He's not quite all there yet because, as he says, he's having confusion because of this, and he disappears. And I love that every time he disappears or makes someone else disappear, Angela says the same thing every time. She goes, mother effer, like every time. And every time it got funnier.
I love her frustration.
Yeah, it's so good.
I mean, who wouldn't be frustrated though, being in a relationship with somebody who already knows the future or is living in the past? And
Yes, yes. Which, by the way, you're going to apologize to me at the end of this review.
excuse me?
I already experienced it. You're going to apologize for not telling me I'm amazing and everything else I said at the start. I can't remember what else I said. What you were going to say about me, but there was more.
I accept this challenge.
You need it. So yes, so she runs upstairs because she hears the kids screaming, and they're looking outside, and he's walking on the pool. He's walking on the water, and the boy's like, "Hey, he looks like Cal." And she's honest, because it is Cal, and she runs outside after the kids get beamed away. Because he waves at them and then snaps his fingers essentially and beams them away, and she's like, "Mother effer!" And she runs out, and he's like, "Where are our kids? Where are our kids?" And he explains that he sent them to Will, her grandfather, and that he was expecting them at the theater. So this was always going to happen. And he also says,
Did you think for a sec that he sent them to the other grandfather, the one that we saw in the first episode?
"Oh, I'd forgotten about him." No, because he says,
I guess I was expecting him to come back in some way.
yeah, he probably still will at some point, but I'm thinking Will though. A, because it's a theater, because I imagine it's probably the renovated theater that he came, his mother was involved in as a kid, and also he says he was expecting them, which makes me think it's Will because he's got an alliance with Will.
Right. Yeah.
So
I don't know. My mind went there right away for some reason.
But for the record though, he never actually. I mean, I think from this he then says he's got an alliance with him. Because she asks, like, "How do you know my grandfather?" So I think it is kind of clear that he's talking about Will after the next couple of lines.
Oh yeah, it definitely is.
One important thing though he says is important is he says you have to see me on the pool. That's important for later. So we'll find out next episode why that's important.
I guess. I mean, it was brought up also earlier in Vietnam where she was impressed that he could walk on water, but like sarcastically so.
Well, it's a callback to that, but I don't think that's why it's important. I
Well,
think
he definitely says you'll have to know for later.
Yeah. It's important for later, so I think there's going to be a moment where she has to know he was here at this time or something like that, or exactly where he was or something. Like this is going to be relevant somehow next episode. So
I know only one episode left.
I know, it's so weird, right? But this episode did answer a lot. This episode gave us a lot.
Did. Yeah.
So we have our final kind of time jump, not including going back to the bar, where from present day we see, because she asks like, "How do you know Will?" And he says, "Okay, so 10 years ago, or just before he got the ring in his head, he went to Will, who was living at Captain Metropolis's house that Metropolis had left him in his will, no pun intended, and he comes in. Will doesn't let him in at first. And he just goes through the door because he's Manhattan, and."
He gives a look first.
Yeah, just make sure no one's watching. It's very sly, and he's like, "Hey, I want to have an alliance with you." It's a really bizarre thing because Will's just an old man, not really giving a shit. He's like,
"Yeah,
why do you want an alliance with me?" He's like, "Because you're Hoodie Justice." He's like, "Huh." And I love how grumpy Will is. He's such a grumpy man. So
he's over it.
So, and then this is where it gets kind of sad actually, because the piano starts playing again, the music, and he says that he's in love with her, and when Will's asking, like, "Why does she want me in her life?" and she does, and I'm like, "Yeah, how do we? As far as we know, she doesn't. Like everything we've seen, she doesn't." And then he says something kind of touching. He says, she insists. She always says she doesn't want a family, and yet all of her actions insist that she does. That's all she wants. She's kind of in denial about what she actually wants in life. She's scared of having one, and he even brings it up in the scene, where she has to say leave, because he brings up, I make you feel safe because you're scared of having a family because of what happened to your parents. You've always had this insecurity, kind of thing. And I love this scene because it really started to play with the Manhattan experience time and what it could do in storytelling, because, Angela says, you're talking to him right now, 10 years ago. And he's like, yes. And he even says to Will, and 10 years ago, I'm talking to Angela right now in the future in 10 years' time in 2019. And Angela says to Manhattan in present day, "Can you ask Will why how he knew that Judd was a member of Cyclops and why he had a clan robe in his closet?" So then it goes to, 2009 with Will, and Manhattan says, she's asking why or how you knew Judd was part of the Cyclops and how he had a clan outfit in his closet. And his response was beautiful. Will simply says, who's Judd? And then it comes back, and Manhattan says he doesn't know who Judd is or why he has a clan outfit or whatever he says. And it's basically, and Angela herself.
He says, but he does now.
But he does now. And Angela herself realizes that she just put the idea and all the information in Will's head to come to Tulsa and do all this in the first place. And this is where he brings up the chicken and the egg and how, like, she's like, no, I didn't want you to cause this.
Hyperventilating, like, oh my God, did I start all this?
It's kind of beautiful. And I love that she's aware enough that she gets it as soon as, like, that line comes back to her. And I love the going back and forth between the two scenes. It's kind of, there's a sweetness to it that I really like.
Yeah, and it's a bit of time travel, which we don't really see all that often. Like, we get time jumps and we know that things are being experienced simultaneously through him, but we never really get an example of time travel.
That's the thing.
It makes sense.
Technically, it isn't time travel, but information is traveling through time. Information is going back, but from Manhattan's perspective, it's just happening at the same time. So it's this weird thing where technically there's no time travel happening. It's just because of the way Manhattan experiences things that he's able to pass information through the time continuum, or whatever you want to call it. It's kind of... It's unique. It's a unique form of time travel is what I'm saying. It's very different from every other type of time travel we've ever seen. And we've been watching a lot of time travel movies on the Atomic Cinema Experiment.
So we are experts.
Yes. On a sci-fi movie podcast that we do called The Ace. You can go find it. It's good, I think.
I think so.
So no, I love this. I love this conversation through two time periods with two characters, or three characters, I guess, really, I should say. Really, really good.
Really, really good.
And he disappears again. Once again, this is the third and final time when she said "mother effer," and I was losing it because at this point it was almost like a cartoon where she had to chase after him again to try and find him. But he's in the kitchen trying to make waffles because he's hungry.
He says, "What came first, the chicken or the egg?" I'm hungry.
And she smashes his eggs because he's having them float out the fridge. She just smashes, like, no, we're not doing this. Answers, damn it. And she's like, hey, this is dangerous. The cavalry are coming to get you. They believe they can kill you and take your power. We have to go. And he's like, they're already here. There's a truck outside. And she checks outside, and like, sure enough, there's like two trucks now. There's like, they've got a big beam. They're going to, they've got this big antimatter tachyon beam thing they're going to use to capture him. They've been putting some effort into this. And she's like, well, screw this. And he's like, no, this is always going to happen. They're going to capture me. This was always going to happen. And there's nothing we can do to change it. And she's like, the hell we can. And she puts on like her vest, and she goes into her safe, and she's got all her guns, and she's starting to like suit up. And he just kind of stares at her. And it may be my favorite moment of the episode, where he just says, this is the moment. And she's like, what are you talking about? This is the moment I fell in love with you. Because I just told you that nothing you can do to save me, and you're going to try anyway. And this is the moment I fell in love with you. And she's like, well, that's supposed to be romantic. We've already been together for 10 years. Like, well, no, I always loved you because for me, this already happened. That was simultaneously. But like, I love this idea. It was kind of beautiful. And it's fine. I think by the end of the book, Watchmen, I never really liked Manhattan. Like, I don't think you're supposed to. I think by the end of the book, he's kind of
he becomes something beyond human and beyond empathy,
Yes. And I almost feel like this show has kind of like brought him back to humanity in a way where I empathize with him and I actually care about him, and I care that Angela cares about him. And this show, this episode even made that all work. This episode brought it all together in a neat bow in a way that I think is really impressive.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, it was beautiful.
She goes out guns blazing. My note here for this part is just Angela Wick, because she's...
Oh my gosh, she's such a badass.
She's ducking and diving and shooting people. I know some people
are probably going to be asking, like, but why Angela? But, like, who wouldn't be in love with her? She's awesome. She's truly exceptional.
Yeah, I mean, she's going around. She's she shoots several of them. She's trying to get into a truck and she tries to ram the beam, but like the stop doesn't quite get there. Then they sort of like, they have this like grapple gun thing that pulls off the door, and she's caught. This guy, this Rorschach mask wearing 7th Cavalry member has got her dead to rights, and then his head just explodes. And Manhattan saved her. And then the music really ramps up. The music here's beautiful. Because the music, the whole time during this fight, by the way, the music that's playing is not of tense action, it's of emotion. It's an emotional rush of music that's playing through all this stuff. And
because we also know that this is probably, now that he's there, she told him to stay inside, but he had to come out to save her. So we think, oh, Manhattan's right. Yeah.
And he starts but it's a great sequence of him just popping heads left and right, and you feel so powerful. You feel like he's so powerful, and it's like, yeah, they don't stand a chance, even though this is what's going to lead to his capture. It's leading there, but you get caught up in the moment. And she smiles and says, well, we won, you were wrong, and sorry, no, I was right. And then one last member hits the beam and it takes him. And that's kind of...
Looks painful.
It looks painful. He's taken, and so what I was hitting at earlier is I love the idea that like some way he is proven wrong, even if it's not necessarily the idea that they managed to change something that he says is going to happen, but that he's misinterpreted it, and the way it happens is actually better, or like, I don't know, something to give him faith, or not faith, but like hope, I guess.
Does he say that they're going to kill me, or does he say that they're going to try to kill me? Do you know? Yeah, I mean, okay. Do you think that the 7th Cavalry will kill Dr. Manhattan next week?
Well, they're definitely going to try to. Are they going to succeed?
Do you think they will?
No. I think it's 50-50. It depends what the plots do.
It would be risky. I mean, risky for the show to do.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But, I mean...
I almost feel like...
Cool also, I don't know.
I almost feel, though, like Dr. Manhattan, by his nature, kind of has to die. Like, in order for there to be truly peace again, in some form, like, the idea of this Superman existing, like, he has to kind of, like, take himself out of the picture, right? Like, it's basically it's the end of T2. It's like, there's one more chip. It's this idea that they're always going to be tempted to try and take the power that he has because it's too tempting. It kind of goes back to what Veidt said to him earlier on, where he's complaining about it, and yet they still make their bombs. That's essentially what 7th Cavalry are trying to do. They're trying to make a new Manhattan that they have under their control. It's theirs.
Well, they're trying to take the Manhattan that exists and give it to somebody else.
Yeah, I mean,
somebody who has their agenda.
I mean, yeah, sure, that's exactly what they're doing, but it's semantics. The point is that because it exists, they know they want it, and they're always going to try and get it. So I can see an ending to this where Manhattan either willingly or accepts that for the world to move on, he has to go. He has to not exist. And there's some beauty in that. Now, obviously, he doesn't really say much about Lady True or the clock or anything like that. That's not really brought up this episode. Angela mentions Lady True at one point that she knows things, but other than that, it's never really mentioned. So I'm sure we'll get.
And also, Veidt kind of mentions it, because Veidt from 2009 says that, he knows he's been on Europa, and Manhattan says, "How did you know that?"
Yeah, this line.
A little elephant told me.
Yes, a little elephant told me. I forgot. I actually did have that noted down, and we were too busy debating something stupid, I think. I lost track. But yes, that line did stick out to me, because there's only one place we've seen an elephant this season, and it was under Lady True's roof. So we'll see. We have to assume in some capacity that she is working with him, given the statue and given everything else. Obviously, we've got one more scene to talk about with Veidt.
Also, but how does Lady True know?
Satellites. We saw a satellite orbiting Europa before.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's what Veidt was trying to
one out there.
Yeah, that's what Veidt was trying to get his message to. So it makes
I thought maybe
sense.
she again just somehow knows the future, but who knows? Maybe you're right. Maybe it's just satellite, because we did see one. Although we don't technically know whose satellite that was. We just assume it's true.
Well, it's the only likely option at this point, but there's no one else it could be.
Maybe Dan? Was it owl shaped at all?
I don't
Maybe
believe.
it's Lube Man?
Oh, you think Lube Man's got a satellite budget?
He's a mystery. I don't know.
Lube Man's sending satellites into space. Oh, I was grabbing the cap. Sorry. I had to go off mic for a second. Firefly was causing trouble. So we cut back to the bar one final time. And I think it was actually earlier here. Actually, we didn't mention the line where she says, "I can't get involved with someone that I know it's going to end in tragedy." And he says, "Well, aren't relationships by definition always going to end in tragedy?" Because I mean that's true. Either you break up with someone, or one of you dies, or both of you die, or like these are the options basically. And she's like, "Okay, fair point." That was earlier on, but I didn't want to not mention it. But this is where she finally asks, his name, other than Manhattan. He's like, "I'm John," with no H. Oh no, it was this scene the tragedy thing happened. Never mind, I'm talking nonsense. It was in exactly the place that I put it. I'm a genius. And
this is the part where I'm supposed to say you're a genius.
I mean, you can't. I mean, no, we've passed that point now. You just have to apologize at the end for not saying it earlier. For my prediction to be right. But yes. So do you want to go out for dinner tomorrow? And she's like, "F it, why not?" cut to credits.
I love it. Yeah, I love her line.
Has that funny beat. And he's kind of won her over the course of this story. She's at least curious enough to go on a date and hear some more. But there's a post-credit scene. There is Veidt, who's in his cell. Although actually at first he's getting tomato smushed in his face by all the Crookshanks and Phillips.
Yeah. They're asking him if he's going to leave.
And he keeps saying,
no, they say, "Will you stay?"
And he keeps saying no, yeah. And he's in his chambers, in his cell, and the game warden comes in, and I actually kind of guessed before he said it, but he actually says it in the scene that he was the first. He was the two that was the Adam and Eve, if you will, of this bubble. He was the first Phillips.
Although we don't know where Eve is.
Yeah, the Crookshanks. Where's she? Is she dead, or is she also someone prominent? Is she someone that's going to?
Or is she gone, and that's why he's kind of an asshole? Well, we know why he's an asshole. He's an asshole because his god abandoned him.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah. Well, so hopefully we'll maybe see the original Crookshanks, as it were. Not the human one that was based on, but the original birthed one from Europa.
Yes, Eve.
Yes, Eve. But he's in the cell, and the game warden comes in with the cake. And it made me think, how many of these cakes have we had at this point? Because we know he gets sent there 10 years ago. Like, I don't think we're at 10, but we're not a million.
It didn't look like 10 candles. It looked like maybe like 6 or 7.
Yeah, it sounds about right, though. But, I mean, we've seen at least 6 or 7 birthdays at this point, though, right? Of him being here. Because the first one, he was quite happy. He was, he was eating the tomato. He seemed like he was happy in his surroundings. And then we had a cake every episode for a while. There was one, he was eating a cake when he was getting the 2 new ones out of the pool or out the lake, which was like just over the halfway point, I think. And then last week there wasn't one, but there was like 6 in a row with a cake in his sections. And then this is maybe the 6th or 7th cake in total. So there's been 6 or 7 years of this decade, presumably. So it's just a question, does he not get back until present day, or does he get back a little bit early? Is he back, a year or 2 before the main part of the show?
Yeah, maybe. Or does it take a year for him to get back? Who knows?
That's true. No, that's true. Yeah, I mean the trip I don't imagine is quick. If Manhattan's not just going like that and making you teleport, but is he already in contact with Lady True? Is that why she knows certain things? Is that why she knows who? Because I mean, Lady True knows who Manhattan is. She clearly implied that last episode.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And Veidt
she knows because Will knows, because Will saw him.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, Will knows as well. But I was also going to say that Veidt could have also told her, because Veidt knows who he is too. But you're right. Will
no,
also
because they have that conversation saying, when Lady True says
You're right.
to
You're right.
Angela
Yeah.
that Dr. Manhattan's on Earth and he's disguising himself as a human. And she said, "Did my grandfather put that idea, or did you put that idea in my grandfather's head?" She said, "No, actually, he put it in mine."
No, you're right. You're right.
So,
Yeah. But no, all interesting, all the same. But ultimately, the warden's asking why he's so unhappy, and Veidt talks about how everyone is waiting for his return. All of his babies, all of his little pigs, or whatever he says, are all waiting for his return. And then he says the line that I really liked: "Heaven is not enough because heaven doesn't need me."
mm-hmm.
He needs to be needed. He needs to feel like his talents are required, and he's not needed there at all. And then
He thought he wanted a paradise, but he does not.
No, he wants to be needed to create one, but he does not necessarily have any interest in living in it, despite the fact that he thought he did.
Mm-hmm.
And what's lovely about this is that once the game warden leaves, he finds a horseshoe in his cake. And if you remember all the way back to episode 1 of this show, when he first got this cake, the Phillips tried to hand him a horseshoe instead of a spoon or a fork, whatever he was wanting. And he got mad at him and said, "I don't need a goddamn horseshoe." And
He said, "I don't need it yet." Yeah, I remember him saying, "I don't need that yet."
Are you sure he said yet?
I'm fairly certain, yeah.
Because that completely changes what I'm about to say if he said yet.
I'm pretty sure he said, "I don't need that yet," because I remember thinking, that's odd.
Because I was going to say that in some way this Phillips was always like, the reason why he was malfunctioning and giving him a horseshoe is because eventually there's supposed to be a horseshoe in the cake so he can escape, because that's what he pulls out the horseshoe and he starts digging his way out with a horseshoe, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're saying that he said yeah, that would imply that Veidt knows that he eventually needs it for some reason like this.
Yes.
Which would be weird. Why would Veidt know that?
Well, how is he going to use a horseshoe to escape?
Well, he's digging with a horseshoe. It's metal. It's strong enough to hold its shape as he scrapes with it.
I guess, yeah.
But
Seems like it's going to take a long time.
But it's going to take. I mean, maybe that's why it takes 2 years. Because it's going to take some time.
Yeah, that's true. He does kind of pull the Shawshank by like moving a piece of furniture around in order to start digging.
So this is my thing. If he said yet, and he might have, I'm not saying you're wrong, I just don't remember it. But if he said yet, I can't explain why he would know he needs it later. With Phillips though, so in my head, I was trying to form some sort of, like maybe the Phillips are starting to experience time like Manhattan does, but they're not aware of it and they're getting confused because they're just like clones and they're not smart enough to sort of understand it. Or maybe it's to do with the fact that they keep getting killed and they're getting born again. Are they kind of sharing some of the same memories with each other? Is it this mess of knowledge? I don't know. But I mean,
maybe. I mean, they do make the same cake every single time, even though they're different versions of them. But
I guess my question is it just meant to be a funny joke that because we know that sometimes he tries to give him a horseshoe, it's just luck it's in the cake? Because I'm not reading it that way. I'm reading it as the reason why
horseshoe is a sign of luck.
True. But I'm reading it as, no, the reason why he made the mistake is because he was supposed to at some point give him the horseshoe so he could escape.
I can't answer this question because it's one that I have still, but I could have sworn that he said, "I don't need that yet."
That said, there is something kind of beautiful about the randomness of it, that like the luck of fate kind of stepping in and giving him a means to escape. Where Manhattan always thinks that there is like no, choice. Everything's going to happen exactly the way it's supposed to happen.
Right.
This idea that just because one of the clones messed up, and it's a clone that he made, he started making these clones, that the lineage of his clones eventually made this weird mistake that led to... So I can actually sort of see some fun thematic meaning behind it either way, which is kind of cool. So, yeah. Whatever. So he's digging his way out, so Veight's coming home. Somehow. Lady True's sending a rocket to get him.
I don't know. I don't know what this... I still have so many questions about Vite, and we only have one episode left, and we have to wrap up so much.
We do.
I don't know.
I mean, this episode gives. I mean, I still think there'll be some mysteries. I will say this though: if I don't see Luman in the final episode, I'm going to riot.
Luman and Panda save Dr. Manhattan.
In Manhattan, despite all his powers, can't understand or predict what Luman's going to do because he's so slippery. He just can't get a hold of him.
Stupid.
Yeah, you're laughing at it. You can't say shit. I will now accept my apology.
For what?
For not doing the thing halfway through where you say I'm amazing. Oh my god. I try to set up a joke so you could pay it off later.
Mm-hmm.
And then I tried to do it a second time. Now that you're thinking that you then understood what I was trying to do so you could pay off the joke.
You had one fatal flaw. I hate watching you succeed.
Is that us? Did we get to the end of the episode? I think we did. I think we successfully talked about the whole episode.
Oh boy. Yep.
Yeah.
Like I said, only one more to go. They've got a lot of questions to wrap up.
And I'm sure, and this was a longer review. This is definitely the longest one we've done. I'm sure it'll probably be a similar length next week.
Probably. I mean, the show is heavy. It's heavy in themes. It's heavy in story. It's heavy in character. Like, there's a lot to break down.
But hey, that is us. So you can let us know what you thought of this episode of Watchmen in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, all the usual stuff. You can get us on the Twitters at mail_fuzz for channel updates. All that stuff does help and does support us. You can also support us by rating the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars and a review. More people find us that way. Even though Tara's being unprofessional and yawning right into the mic. One other way you can support us though is financially, and they can do that. How, Tara?
Please check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/MildFuzzTV. Donations as low as $1 per month will get you bonus episodes of other shows we do, including the Ace, our science fiction movie review show. So there's a lot of episodes on there. I mean, not a whole lot now, but like there's like a few you can check out.
I think
like the Time Cop, Judge Dredd. So
6 or 7.
check it out.
There's 6 or 7 bonus episodes at the time of recording, I think.
And my voice is going because I had a coughing fit earlier, which might have been edited out. But
oh, it was definitely edited
thank
out.
you for making me do the outro.
Well, you don't think I ever get a coughing fit in the middle of a review and then have to like find my way back?
Yep. I know. I listen to the show.
You have to just pro your way through. You have to be a pro and just do it.
Yep.
So this works. Oh jeez, I'm not looking forward to editing this one, guys. I'll tell you, there was a few tangents that I'm going to have to get the scissors, the trim scissors out to.
It's not my fault.
Like 7 out of 8 of them are your fault.
That doesn't sound like me. I don't tangent.
I will take responsibility for asking a question that set you on a 5-minute vegan warpath, but like the other ones were all your fault. I should have known better. I should have known better than asking a dumb vegan question. All right, that is
Whoa.
See?
Whoa.
See?
Is there a comma around those dumb and vegan words, or?
Yes, there's a comma. Yes, I'm not saying veganism itself is dumb. I'm saying the question about veganism was dumb.
Okay.
We good? Excellent.
Clarification.
That has been our discussion of Watchmen. It has been an absolute travesty. I don't even know why you guys even entertain the idea of listening to us talk about this for as long as we do. But thank you very much. We do appreciate it if you do. We love you loads. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate yeah, turn away from the mic. That'll help the cough not be audible.
I tried.
Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?